Hey, and welcome back to this episode of Pathways to Wealth, where we're talking about the 3 best strategies for investing in real estate. So I've actually been interested in real estate ever since high school. So you may know the story where I got suspended in high school and accidentally started reading business books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Think and Grow Rich, and really changed my thinking from thinking I had to, struggle through high school, go to college and get a job that I hated to, well, there's alternative ways to develop my skill set and get an education and alternative pathways to wealth, which ultimately led to the inspiration for this show, is bringing you different pathways for creating more income, building your wealth, and upgrading different areas of your life. So when it comes to real estate, I knew that this was a vehicle to do both of those things, create income and build wealth from a very early age. And so when I think I was 17 at the time, I went to my first guru seminar. I saw a late night infomercial talking about how to get rich with real estate with no money down, no credit, and become a millionaire overnight, basically, right? And so I went to this hotel seminar and got really amped up and ended up buying the guy's course. I think it was like $1,000 at the time. And even though it was mostly hype, it did set me on a really good path on my real estate journey. So since then, I went into the mortgage business to learn about the secondary mortgage market and, Wall Street, to learn about how to work with realtors, to learn about the different ways to structure financing. And then I went off and built a couple houses, invested in many different types of deals. And ever since that year in high school, I've been a part of about 1,500 to 1,600 real estate transactions. So I understand this space pretty well. And I just want to give you kind of the no fluff, meat and potatoes, how do you invest in real estate? What are the best strategies to do this? So let's go ahead and dive right in. So the first thing I want to say is that real estate investing can be very, very simple. There's no magic formula or, there's no guru in the real estate market that has some secret that you need to pay him $50,000 to learn, right? There's nothing new under the sun. And when you look at real estate, it's actually simple once you understand kind of the major strategies and on a fundamental level how a transaction works. And I'll just say this, if this is the only thing you take away from this episode, pay attention now. The profit in real estate investing is made from problem solving, okay? Strategies and ways to structure deals, that's the easy part. But where you make a lot of money is when you begin to think like a problem solver. And I just want to give you kind of a quick story about problem solving and how this can make a lot of money. So about a year ago, we had a deal. This was the most difficult deal that I've ever done. And I want to walk you through how we found the deal, how we worked through to creating a win-win for us, the seller who sold us the property, and then ultimately our buyer, which on all ends was very complex. But, even though this was a really hard deal to do, I want to show you how it's actually simple, meaning there's only a few things you need to understand. And if you can think like a problem solver, you're going to be able to make a lot of money where other real estate investors aren't going to see the opportunity. So we ended up doing some marketing on the east side of Austin, which years ago used to be a higher crime area, lower income. And right now it's going through some changes. It's going through gentrification where a lot of the older houses that were built in the early 1900s are either being rehabbed or torn down and new houses are being built there. So what used to be a really cheap neighborhood is kind of the hipster, cool, up and coming part of town. So we knew that we liked that part of town because of the changes it was going through. But we knew it was tough to find deals over there because it was very competitive among investors. So we ended up hanging signs. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen the signs that say, "We buy houses." And as cheesy as those are, they actually work if you're consistent with them. So we hung signs and we got a call. We got a call from a guy that said, "Hey, I have a house over here on so-and-so street." And this was literally like 2 or 3 hours after I flew back to the US. I think I was in South America on a scuba diving trip, and I flew back, and my partner, my real estate partner, called me. He was like, "Hey, Chris, we have this deal over here." This guy called. I'm like, "Hey, I just got home from the airport, but I'm gonna go over there. Let's meet and we'll go check it out." So we got to the house, and when we were talking to the guy, he seemed very motivated to sell the property. So this is like a huge piece of the equation, is you have to have a motivated seller. As an investor, you're not going to get a good deal from somebody that just wants to sell their house at retail market value for all cash, right? That's not a good deal. It's kind of like buying an overvalued stock, right? You don't want to just go and just kind of pick a random stock just because, like say you like Apple and you like iPhones. You don't want to just buy Apple because you like iPhones, even though Apple's been a great investment for the past decade or whatever. And in hindsight, it looks like a good investment. What Warren Buffett does, he looks for undervalued companies, right? Companies that he thinks are going to do well in the long run and that currently are undervalued, right? Buy low, sell high. You have to do the same thing in real estate. You need to look for deals that are undervalued. And typically the best way to find those is to work with motivated sellers, somebody who's like, "Look, I need to get out of this property. Either, I got fired and I have to move, or I got a divorce, or, my mother just passed away and they're passing this house on to me." You need to look for situations like that where people are motivated and they want to sell now. And in a lot of cases, they don't want to do the repairs on their house. It might be completely dilapidated. It might just need a paint job and some new carpet, or anything in between there. But you need to find a reason why the person's motivated. Okay, so let's assume that you start there, and that's where we were. So this guy that called us, we went over to his house. The house was completely trashed. I mean, it hadn't been renovated, I think, since the 1940s. There were holes like this big in the floor. The toilet was disgusting. I mean, this house was really, really nasty. So I'm thinking, all right, I don't know if we have a deal here, but the guy was super motivated. He said his mother passed away. He had a couple brothers and sisters, which is always a sign that a deal is going to be more complicated. And but he said, "Yeah, this is really, I really, really need to sell this house. Other people have tried to buy this, but it didn't go through." So I was thinking, okay, why is that? If other investors have looked at this deal, why haven't they been able to make this work? So I looked at the numbers, and I knew that the lot alone was worth at least $150,000 because of where the location was amazing. The house was actually a liability. The house had zero value. It was so bad that it was actually worth negative what it cost to remove the house, to demolish the house and remove it. So if that's 10 grand, you look at the house and say that house has a value of negative $10,000. And so we subtracted that. So I knew that the value of that property was roughly 140 grand. And I knew that for us to pay all cash for that, we needed to buy at a certain percentage below market value. Just like a pawn shop, if you guys have ever seen those, pawn shop shows where they offer like 50 cents on the dollar typically, that's kind of how real estate works on a very like 30,000 foot simple view. So I made him an offer for, I believe, 85 grand cash. I said, "Look, I'll give you 85 grand cash and we'll close in a few days and you can walk away." And he said, "Great, let's do it." So we got it under contract. I'm like, man, this is going to be great. We're going to have a lot that we can either flip to another real estate investor and make a wholesale fee. We'll talk about that in a second. Or we can knock it down and build something here and make a few $100,000. And so we had options. But the idea going into it was we had to know, A, was the guy motivated? B, did the numbers make sense? And C, what were our potential exit strategies? Okay. So all those lined up, we got it under contract, and this is where the real work began, because remember, other investors had been to this house and tried to make a deal happen. Where things got complicated was it was a probate deal. So basically the mother passed away and the title wasn't clean, meaning it wasn't exactly clear who owned the property at that point. That there were half brothers and sisters. There was one guy that was a crackhead. One of the half brothers was actually a legitimate crackhead. Somebody was in jail. One sister was missing, like nobody knew where she was. So for us to be able to actually transfer ownership of this property, we had to track all that down. We had to figure all that out. So we had, at the time, a really, really good attorney that knew how to structure creative deals. So she went to work tracking everybody down. And long story short, it took us about 6 months to do this deal just because we had to track everybody down. But we were willing to do the work of tracking people down and convincing them. They all had to agree on the price. We had to convince them why that was a smart move, and that unless they had, $100,000 to fix that house up, nobody else was going to buy it except an investor. And we were the only people at the time that were willing to go through all that work to make the deal happen. So by thinking like problem solvers and by actually putting in the work, we were able to do that deal. And it came down to the wire. Once we closed, we said, okay, what do we want to do with this? We could either wholesale it for 130, 140 grand to an investor who wants to build a house here, or we can do the build ourselves. At that point, I said, look, I'm not really a developer at this point. I'm looking for different types of deals. My partner at the time said, yeah, I don't want to build a house either. And there's a guy in the neighborhood who's already changing the neighborhood, building these beautiful big $500,000 plus homes on these lots. I'm like, okay, let's talk to him. He was extremely interested in the property, in the plot of land, and knew that, again, the house had no value. We actually had a bidding war going between 2 or 3 guys that wanted to build on that lot. So we ended up making, I think, 20 or 30 grand, just real quick, just an assignment fee. And the only work that we did was really going to the house, sitting down with the guy, getting it under contract, and letting our attorney do the work of putting all the pieces in place to make that deal happen. So just by doing a little bit of marketing and thinking through a problem and talking to somebody and structuring a deal, you can make tens of thousands of dollars without doing much real work on the house, right? So we'll talk about the 3 strategies, but the point of this story is just to get you thinking that real estate investing isn't about the strategies per se. The strategies are important, and that's what we're going to talk about in a second, but the most important thing is thinking like a problem solver. Okay, so now that you know that problem solving is the #1 skill in real estate, I want to talk about strategy #1, which is wholesaling, okay? And if you saw the interview that I did with Rick Gossett and John Fedro, both amazing real estate investors, we have talked a little bit about wholesaling, but I wanted to go in more depth and talk about what this is. And really, if you've seen infomercials that say like, buy real estate with no credit and no money down, what they're talking about is wholesaling, okay? And what happens, there's 3 steps to actually doing a wholesale deal. Step 1 is you find a motivated seller, just like we did on that East Austin property, negotiate a deal. So you find a property, you say this, the numbers make sense, you negotiate a deal and you put it under contract. So you say, okay, I'm going to buy this property contingent to a few things, and you have clauses where you can get out of it, and you put just a little bit of deposit money down, and you basically tie up the property. So you say, I have this property under contract and I can either close on it or say I'm not interested after, whatever contingency doesn't work out. Step 2 is you find an end investor that's interested, and you assign that contract to them with an assignment fee. It could be a couple $1,000s, could be $20,000, it could be $100,000. It depends on the deal. But basically, where you're providing value is you're finding the deal and putting it under contract, and then bringing it to an investor and saying, hey, I'm bringing you this great deal on a silver platter. All I'm asking for is a fee of X% or X $1,000. And there might be some negotiation there with your end investor too. And this is actually how I buy a lot of my personal investment properties now, is I have wholesalers that are out, their job basically all day, every day is to go out and find good deals and put them under contract, bring them to me, and I evaluate. So out of 10 or 20 deals, I might buy 1 or 2 of them. But the idea with wholesaling is just to make it very simple and easy for the wholesaler to tie something up and then ultimately sell it. And that's step 3, which is you collect your wholesale fee at closing. So you do what's called a simultaneous closing, where you buy it from your original seller, and then right after that, you sell to your end investor and you keep the fee. So this is by far the easiest way to get started in real estate. If you're saying, well, Chris, what do? I really don't have a lot of cash. I don't have a lot of expertise. Really, all you need to do is learn how to evaluate what a good deal is. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And then go out and hustle, do marketing, put up signs, mailers, or just not. There's so many like guerrilla marketing techniques that you can use for this stuff, but go out and find these deals, put them under contract, and then network with investors. And I'll tell you, if you truly have good investment deals that you put under contract, you'll have no problem selling them, because they're in every market that I've ever invested in. There are plenty of investors that are willing to invest in good deals. So the hustle is actually finding what a true good deal is. Okay, so we talked about wholesaling. Let's talk about strategy number 2, which is fix and flip. And this is what, we're talking about. If you ever see those TV flipping shows, like flip this house or anything like that, where they go in, they look at a crappy, ugly property, they fix it up and they sell it for a profit. That's what a fix and flip is. So you find an ugly house, you put some work into it, so it might be a minor rehab where it just needs carpet and paint, slap some lipstick on the pig, and then sell it for a little profit. Or it might be a major rehab deal where you have to work on the foundation and you have to replace the roof and AC units and kitchens and bathtubs and all that stuff. So right now I actually have one of those deals going where it's a major rehab where the rehab cost is actually equal or more than what the original purchase price of the property was. So in some later videos, I'll do some case studies of specific examples of different real estate deals. But for now, let's just focus on kind of the basics and the high-level overview of what these strategies are. Now, when it comes to doing a fix and flip, this takes a lot more knowledge and capital than wholesaling, because there's holding costs. Whenever you're fixing and flipping a property, you have rehab costs, right? What it costs to purchase the property and fix it up. You also have holding costs, which might be a little bit, or if you have to sit on a property for a long time before you can sell it, it might be a lot. So you really need to have expertise of construction, how to manage a construction project, and the capital to see it through. And if you don't, like I'm not a construction guy, then you need a partner. And I have a couple really good partners that do have that expertise and knowledge and desire to work on site. I don't have the time or the desire to go manage a crew of construction workers. That's just not my forte. It's not my skill set. I'd rather be the cash guy and just help see deals come together than actually be the boots on the ground. So you have to figure out where you fit in. But the worst thing that you could do is go it alone. Now, one thing with fix and flips is you can finance the cost of purchasing a property and the cost of fixing up a property with what's called a hard money loan, which is basically a fast, expensive loan. Okay, so it's not like going and buying a traditional house and getting like an FHA or a conventional loan. A hard money loan is typically high percent, above 10% interest, and you typically have to pay points at closing or certain fee at closing. But the reason why these are desirable is because you can get cash quickly, and a lot of times these loans are not based on the borrower's credit score. So even if your credit sucks or you don't have a lot of money, the lender makes a lending decision based on the deal. So if it's a great deal, they'll lend the money because they know if you default, they can pick up where you left off and make money on the deal. So it's a great kind of win-win if you're buying these properties right. So there's a formula that a lot of investors and investing courses will talk about how to make offers on properties. And the formula is what's called ARV, so after repaired value. So if a house is worth $100,000 in its current beat down state, but it's worth $200,000 after you fix it up, then that's the ARV, is the after repaired value. And typically investors will take 70% or less of that value minus repairs and that's the maximum offer. So if it's a $100,000 house, you would offer, 70%, $70,000 minus the repairs. So if the repairs are $20,000, so you'll take 70 minus 20, so that's $50,000, your max offer. So you can offer 50 cents on the dollar. Now that's just a rough guideline, and that's different based on every deal, different markets, but that's just kind of like a guideline. I typically am even a little bit less than 70%, maybe 60, 65%. But if you're offering, 80 or 90 cents on the dollar, if a house is worth, say, 200 grand and you're offering 190, there's not enough room there. You really need room for the repairs, the holding cost, and your profit. All right, so that was fix and flip, strategy number 2. Let's go to strategy number 3, which is owner financing. So owner financing is a great way to use non-bank financing to buy and sell properties. Okay, so on the buying side, so again, you can use this to both buy properties and sell properties. On the buying side, this is where the original owner sells to you and holds a mortgage. Okay, so let's say I find a motivated seller and I'm like, hey, Mr. Jones, I want to buy your property. Will you accept owner financing? What that means is, if I buy it for 100 grand, can I give you a down payment and then you hold a mortgage? So I make payments to you, maybe with interest. And sometimes a seller will say, no, I just need all cash. And sometimes if they're not motivated for the cash, but they want the payments and maybe to make interest, they'll actually hold a mortgage, hold a note on that property to where you don't have to come up with 100% of the cash. And another way that might look is you could keep an existing bank loan in place. So say Mr. Jones has a house that's worth 100 grand and he has a $50,000 mortgage on it. You could take ownership of that property, what's called subject to the existing mortgage. So what that means is you leave that mortgage in place, that $50,000 bank loan that's there, and you just take ownership of the property. Now, there are some things that you have to consider, like banks can call loans due, but as long as you structure a deal properly, you shouldn't have any issues doing that. So that's how to buy with owner financing. Now, this becomes really powerful on the selling side too. So as a seller, you would sell to your end buyer and hold a mortgage, okay? So let's say that you owned a house that you fixed up, say you paid $50,000 for a property and you put $50,000 into it, and so you're $100,000 into a property, and let's say the value is 150 grand. So you could sell that for all cash for 150 grand and walk away with $50,000, or you could say take a payment of 20%, so you could take $30,000 cash and then hold a mortgage for $120,000 at 8 or 10%. So owner financing is typically more expensive than going to a bank and getting a loan for 4 or 5%. But the reason why I like to do that, so I really am not a fan of being a landlord. So instead of just renting my properties out, what I like to do, and this is single family homes, like my multifamily apartment complexes, of course I rent those and we have property management in place. But when it comes to selling like single family homes, I love to do it on owner financing because I can earn 8 to 10% interest on my money. And if that person defaults, not that I want people to default, but if somebody can't pay that mortgage or they move or they disappear, you get to keep the down payment and then you get to resell the house. So it's really a beautiful way for people that can't qualify for a bank loan to be able to purchase homes. And it's also a great way for investors to earn 8 to 12% on their money. You can't do that consistently and securely in the stock market, in CDs, in a savings account. This debt is secured by real estate. So if they default, you don't lose your money. You keep the house. It's just a beautiful way to really grow your wealth quickly. Okay, so there's actually a quote that I want to talk about, and this is kind of a mindset shift for a lot of people. The quote is, "The human species is composed of two distinct races, the men who borrow and the men who lend." It's by Charles Lamb. Now, as an investor, you're going to do both. Okay, you're going to borrow money and you're going to lend money. But I'm thinking in terms of a more general life philosophy. So many people, especially in Western culture and here in America, have a consumer mindset where they get credit cards and they put shit like TVs and computers and toys and just stuff that they don't need on consumer debt, and then they have interest rates of 12 to 30% on these credit cards, and then they have interest working against them. And then you have people that understand how powerful compounding interest really is, and then they do everything they can to make debt and leverage work for them, and they want to be the bank, they want to be the lender instead of the gambler or the creditee, the person who's in debt. Be the lender, don't be the borrower. If you can get yourself thinking in that mindset, over the course of a few years to several decades, your financial wealth will be dramatically different. And that's really my focus now, is to focus on working and partnering with as many great real estate investors that I can find, and help lend to them and also lend to individual buyers. I was in the mortgage business for a long time, and I was on the front lines of the subprime mortgage crisis. And I saw just how bad things can get when people get desperate and when people try to borrow above their means. And so I try to be what I consider a very rational and considerate real estate investor. I'm not going to put somebody in one of my homes that can't afford it, because it's not good for anybody. It's not good for me as the investor. It's not good for the person moving into the house. So real estate investing is not only a great business, but it's a great way to help a lot of people. And I am just really passionate about my long-term vision, which is to own $50 million worth of real estate. And so I would just encourage you listening to this or watching this to take action. And I want to talk about a couple of action items. So the first one is decide where you want to start. There's so many ways to skin a cat in the real estate market. And, decide if you want to be a wholesaler, if you want to be a lender, if you want to do fix and flips, if you want to be a landlord. There's so many ways to go, but just decide. It starts with a decision, right? Step 2 is take action. Like, don't just say that sounds great and do nothing. Like, actually take steps to move forward. That's the biggest differentiator between the millionaires that I know and the people that just complain about money all the time, is the people that make money and have money actually take action. They're not smarter, they're not luckier, they're not more, entitled. They just do more stuff, right? And just take a lot of action. And then the final thing is, don't try to do it all alone, because real estate is a very complex thing where there's a lot of moving parts. And I've found it, the more that I partner with really good people, the more money I make and the easier and smoother my transactions go. So thank you for watching this episode or listening to this on the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show. And also, you can go to chrisdunn.com for the show notes, where we have a lot of resources and tools and extra articles and interviews and things that will help you build more income, build more wealth, and upgrade different areas of your life. So please like this up, share it with your friends, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care.